Good afternoon. I'm Dr. Mark Andrew Holacek. I'm here from my hermitage in Lynchburg, and as you know, I'm a Thomas Jefferson scholar and author of 23 books and more coming on Thomas Jefferson. And my interest in Jefferson is varied. I'm not one of those scholars who's interested only in talking about his republicanism and whether it worked or not, or Sally Hemings, did he have sex with a slave? I talk a lot about that only because of the saturation of progressivist, revisionist thinking. And here I have my dog Jeffy on my lap again. But today I want to talk to you. Jeff, sit down. I have abundant interest in Thomas Jefferson because he is an abundantly interesting person. He read anything that was of any interest to human beings. He was interested in such things. Mathematics, he approached everything with a mathematician's eye. Uh, Geometry, geology, philology, study of just acquisition and study of languages, paleontology, philosophy, religion, agriculture, architecture, and gardening, and all such things. Jefferson was interested in everything, and he was like a child at play in the world. And often used to tell my students, if you would be going for a walk out in the countryside with Thomas Jefferson and engage yourself in a conversation with him, at some point you might turn to him to say something and find that he's not there, that he's out there examining a small plant that he'd never seen before, some such thing. So he was like a child at play in the cosmos, and he thought that the cosmos was God directed in some sense. I want to talk about that today. The title of today's presentation is something to the effect is, did Jefferson think that humans occupied a privileged position in the cosmos? And cosmos is Greek. It's a Greek word, and it means an ordered thing. And I suspect what I want to do today is try to read Jefferson in a Humean light. And I mean by that to look at him as David Hume may have looked at his cosmos. To start out with a quote from mathematician and philosopher Blaise Pascal, brilliant man. He writes, in the end, what is man in nature? Nothing compared to the infinite, and everything compared to the nothing, a midpoint between nothing and everything, infinitely removed from understanding the extremes. The end of things and their principle are hopelessly hidden from him in an impenetrable secret. So we get with the advent of geometry, Descartes, Pascal, people using mathematics to explore the universe and the successes that we'll have with Newton's three laws of motion and his universal law of gravitation. So we have all these successes using mathematics. Sit down, Jeffy. Come on, becoming a pest. All right. Now, as Pascal talks about that man's position in the cosmos is in some sense privileged in that humans are observers. Jeff, relax. But yet he is almost a nothing compared to the infinite of everything, the infinity of God and so forth. Now, as I talked about, use of mathematics, geometry, and understanding the cosmos was around since the ancient Greeks. In the second century AD, we had the astronomer, geometer Ptolemy, and he wrote in his work, the Almagest, that the Earth has the ratio of a point to the heavens. And in 1543, when Copernicus comes up with his De Revolutionibus, on the revolutions of the heavenly bodies, he says the same thing, but he says it's the sun that has the ratio of a point to the heavens. And the sun being a massive body, and Copernicus, knowing that, and Ptolemy knowing that the Earth is a relatively massive body, they knew since Aristotle's day, pretty much it was known the size of the Earth was known. It was measured out rather successfully in his day. So to say that the Earth or even the Sun has the ratio of a point to the outer regions of the cosmos is to say that the universe, cosmos, is a very, very large thing. Now, when Pierre Simon Laplace, works out the intricacies of Newton's dynamics, according to Newton's system, gravity is a inverse square law that relates to any two mass points. If you look at this mechanical lead pencil in my fist, there are two mass points. If I can consider the mass is the weight of this pencil on the Earth. The mass would be the same on the moon, even though the weight would be different. So if I consider these as two mass points, the closer these are, the force is very, very great. The farther away, the force diminishes tremendously quickly. Laplace tells us, my dog is really fidgety today. Laplace tells us when you talk about, well, where's the place? I mean, Newton's universe is so successful at explaining everything, even human behavior in some measure, right? Humans are two mass points, and you can talk about free will all you want. Push a person off a cliff, and he can I will that I do not fall. He's going to fall. Anyways, when asked about the need for God in explaining, the behavior of mass points, and Laplace said famously, "Je n'ai pas besoin de cette hypothèse-là." I don't have need of that hypothesis. People set down. People took that as a description that he was an atheist, and that doesn't necessarily follow. He was basically saying that within the ideological structure of the cosmos, there's no need to bring God in to explain things when the laws explain things so successfully as it were. All right. The wonderful Jewish, one of my favorite philosophers, Baruch Spinoza, says, by God, I understand a being absolutely infinite, a substance consisting of an infinity of attributes, of which each one expresses an eternal and infinite essence. In short, Pascal was iterating in some measure the Stoic notion. He was a neo-Stoic that God was the universe was God. David Hume was one of the great figures of his day, of Jefferson's day, one of the great figures in philosophy, as far as I'm concerned, of all time, and wrote this wonderful book on dialogues concerning natural religion. And you need to sit down. That's for Fingy. My cat's in his sleeping spot, and he's all upset. He says that the works of nature bear a great analogy to the production of art is evident. Here, then, the existence of deity is plainly ascertained by reason. What he does is there's a dialogue between three interlocutors in that book, and Hume ultimately settles on, through analogy, the existence of God. Right? He says he's arguing by analogy that the universe itself shows all the evidence of being an ordered thing. Greek cosmos, an ordered thing. Ordered things imply an orderer, someone who puts them in order, keeps them in order, and so forth. So God must exist. There must be a God behind the great design of nature. Okay. Now, in his work on suicide, Hume writes, the providence of the deity appears not immediately in any operation, but governs everything by those general and immutable laws which have been established from the beginning of time. All events, in one sense, may be pronounced by the action of the Almighty. They proceed from those powers with which he has endowed his creatures. All right. So even the actions of humans are God caused. All things are caused and determined, right? There doesn't seem to be much room in this picture for free will, and there isn't. He writes as well, when the passions play, when the judgment dictates, when the limbs obey, this is all the operation of God, and upon these animate principles, as well as upon the inanimate, he has established the government of the universe. He adds, whoever takes in at one glance the most distant regions of space and remotest periods of time will notice that all events are governed or subject to general laws that govern the universe. So here, everything that goes on is God directed. So we have a sort of explanation in keeping with the laws of bodily motion uh, uh, given by Isaac Newton. And Hume just says all these things are God directed. Um, a distinction for Hume here, I might add, is that for Hume, everything that God creates is as important as anything else. So the God creating is creating with an eye to the, the perfection or the goodness or whatever you want to call it, all things. There's no reason to privilege any one thing as humans have been doing for millennia, thinking God created humans in his own image and likeness or something like that. This is not Hume's picture. He writes, the life of man is of no greater importance to the universe than that of an oyster. This seems like a very damning claim, a sort of verbal dislodgement, as it were, of any sort of anthropocentric, anthropomorphic biases that humans might have. And it has that effect, but it's not meant to be so. It would be like, I use this analogy sometimes when I teach. Imagine uh, the spoke of a bike could speak, and the bike is crafted really beautifully by the bike maker. And imagine after the bike is created and sits in someone's garage at some point, a spoke, all the parts are animate in some weird sense, and one spoke speaks up and says, the bike maker made this beautiful bike all for my sake. And then the other spokes would rise up and think, well, what about us? We're equally as important. And then the links of the chain on the bike are saying, well, we're equally important to the construction of the chain, which makes the bike go, and the gears and the pedals and then the tires and all the other parts rise up in rebellion, because we're all equally important. That's what Hume's getting at when he says that the oysters are just as important as humans. All these things are created by God. God had his reasons for creating. So these things are just as important as human beings. I think it's a really beautiful sentiment, by the way. Jefferson's universe, I think we can gain much if we liken Jefferson's thinking to that of Hume. And Jefferson, in a letter to John Adams, 11 April 1823, he writes, I hold without appeal to revelation that when we take a view of the universe in its parts, general or particular, it is impossible for the human mind not to perceive and feel a conviction of design, consummate skill, and indefinite power in every atom of its composition. And he talks about how all these parts are held together by the balance of centrifugal and centripetal forces, right? He adds, it is impossible for the human mind not to believe that there is in all this design, cause and effect, up to an ultimate cause, a fabricator of all things from matter and motion, their preserver and regulator while permitted to exist in their present forms, and their regenerator in new and other forms. Um, you know, so what he's talking, notice in the first quote, he's talking about, we look at this and we don't, like Hume, we don't derive God's existence by analogy, by saying, like, a watch that I own, its parts are so intimately related that it bespeaks a watchmaker. Likewise, the universe's parts are so intimately related, it bespeaks a creator of the universe, a demiurgos, if you will, or a creator or something. And so he's talking about perceiving and feeling. And Jefferson gets perception and feeling from Destet de Tracy. Go sit down, Jeff. I'll move him to the chair. By that, his belief in a God is not grounded on reason. It's not grounded through analogy. It's grounded on, there's an immediate perception. One exists in the cosmos. One really sees God. One feels God. One senses God, right? There's no analogy, there's no use of reason in any of these sentiments for Jefferson. Um, his God, I have argued in my book, The Surprisingly Simple Religious Views of Thomas Jefferson, that Jefferson's clearly a deist, not a theist. In other words, he doesn't believe that God needs to come in and intervene. He doesn't need to send Jesus to fix things. God, following Lord Bolingbroke, God creates his universe and he gets it right. He's powerful enough. He has capacity sufficient to construct the universe and get it right the first time. So how are we to understand deity in the universe? God does not intervene in the actions of the universe, but it's sort of like imagine a builder who builds a house and then to to regulate the temperature in the house, he puts in a thermostat. A thermostat, of course, it's going to need regular fixing or so forth or replacing. But imagine that we had this infinitely perfect thermostat, in that one regulates the thermostat, and once the person who creates the thermostat puts it in the house, the thermostat itself regulates. So there are, so if we follow the analogy for Jefferson, God is like that. God creates a universe with its own laws, but then it's on its own once God creates it. All right. And Hume's deity, Jefferson's deity, like Hume, is not the sort of deity to whom you would pray, right? He makes us moral agents, but it's not the sort of deity that one would access through supplication. Jefferson writes in a letter to Miles King, 1814, God has formed us as moral agents, not that in the perfection of his state he can feel pain or pleasure from anything we may do. He is far above our power, but that we may promote the happiness of those which whom he has placed us in society by acting honestly towards all, benevolently towards those who fall within our way, respecting sacredly their rights bodily and mental, and cherishing especially their freedom of consciousness, freedom of conscience as we value our own. So, in effect, that's a description of the sort of duties that we have. God creates us in some sense. He doesn't expect us to pray or supplicate or sing hymns. And Jefferson sang hymns. He went to church and did that. But here's a clear indication that he just didn't think that this mattered at all. He loved to sing. He had a fine tenor voice from all we can understand, and he liked to exercise it when his older sister Jane was alive. He loved to sing church hymns with her. She had a very beautiful voice and was very musical. Anyways, the idea here is that God creates us and gives us a sense of morality. We feel our way through moral situations. You don't think through them, in spite of what Adrian Koch and other Yarbrough and people like that have written. Very fine scholars, by the way, but I think they get it wrong when it comes to moral sense. Jefferson does not think reason had much of a role at all when it comes to moral sensing. We sense our way through situations. We feel right or wrong. We don't have to think about it. When we think, we screw things up. All right, so we come to so that said, I'll say in a future episode, we'll talk about Jefferson's moral sense. It's a very important concept, by the way. Very important to understand what Jefferson thought, because he thought morality was more important than human living. All of our actions, almost all of our actions, have some moral content. Very few are amoral, right? Don't have anything to do with morality. We talked about that in Jefferson's and 115 Questions in Jefferson's letter to Maria Cosway. He talks about squaring the circle, measuring the path of a comet, such things being acts of reason, right? These things have no moral implications. Counting the hairs on my forearm would be, in spite of being a colossal waste of time. Imagine in a state of inebriation or boredom, I wanted to do that, so I did that. This would be an act without any moral content. The only way it might be a moral act in that if in counting the hairs on my forearm, I would avoid moral activity that is egregiously needed, then I would say my act is immoral. Here comes Jefferson jumping up again. All right, you're here, Jeff. All right. He talks of the moral sense in very many different letters. Now, I want to say in this letter to John Adams, he says the moral sense is an instinct and innate, that the moral sense is as much part of our constitution as that of feeling, seeing, or hearing. As a wise creator must have seen to be necessary in an animal destined to live in society, that every human mind feels pleasure in doing good to another. So we feel our way in the moral world. You need to sit down. Let Fingy have his sleeping spot. Okay, don't be pissed. All right. The I mentioned before, one of the things I love most in doing Jeffersonian scholarship is that when you're researching one thing, you discover something you didn't expect to find. There was a free press writer many decades ago, long ago. He said things I learned while looking up other things. He had a column and he did that, and that's there's an excitement to that. I think Jefferson would have found that exciting as well. This clause in an animal destined to live in society. He says the creator saw the moral sense necessary because we are social animals. That additional clause bespeaks the suggestion. I think we can question, do other social creatures have a sense of morality? And is the human sense of morality? I think it shows rather plainly that Jefferson's commitment to a moral sense and human sense of morality, sit down, is not. Um, he's really behaving badly today. Sorry, guys. He's Cat's got his sleeping spot on my desk, and he's really irritated by it. So he's letting me know, relax, boy, you relax. All right. So this animal destined to live in society, we look at vertebrates such as bats, crows, hominids, elephants, dolphins, horses, lions, hyenas. We look at invertebrates, ants, bees, termites, wasps, those sorts of uh, uh, invertebrates. And these are, have been known to be for millennia social creatures. They behave socially. Do they have a moral sense as well? The suggestion I have here is indeed they have a sense of morality. And I don't want to think of, so the sense of morality that humans have is species specific. It's not any absolute sense of there's an absolutely right or wrong thing to do, governed by God and the cosmos, right? That you do this, you get to heaven. You don't, you go to that other place down there, wherever that's supposed to be. Uh, so, Jefferson is very much the anthropologist here, and he's talking about, I suspect rather strongly, that he's committed, like it seems Hume is, that humans have a species-specific sense of morality, of what it means for behavior to be good or bad, that is relative to human beings, right? In the same way, bats have a species-specific sense of morality, what it means for them to behave good or badly as social creatures. Deity saw it as that. Now, I think this is an astonishingly significant disclosure, right, Jeffy? You think so too? Come on, we're going to say bye soon. You think this is pretty important? Yep. It shows that Jefferson really was a an anthropologist, someone who studied biota, who looked at all the plants and animals, who wanted to categorize, wanted to understand how they were. And it gives us an appreciation of moral action, not absolutely or divinely understood as, agreeable to God or disagreeable to God, or understood in any absolute Kantian sense. Is that an action is right if it can be, that something is right or wrong, a rule is right or wrong for moral behavior. It can be universalizable. You can talk about Kant some other time. So this is a very important disclosure that humans have a sense of right or wrong relative to what it means to be human, and crows and dolphins and puffins and penguins perhaps have a sense of right or wrong relative to what it means to be a social animal like that. Anyways, well, I hope you enjoyed this. This is a very important, I think, episode here. Shows Jefferson as a natural scientist. And if you did, please share this with other people. Please give it a like and watch other episodes. I want to close by saying what I'm aiming to do here is something different than what you'll get by other people talking about Jefferson on social media. I'm not here writing for people who want to get a general notion who Jefferson was. These videos are for people who know Thomas Jefferson and want to get to know him intimately. So we're going into and studying certain topics in a way that you'll never you won't have access to such things that I'm talking about other than going through my videos. So that's the point here. I'm not trying to reach a very general audience and say sort of general things about Jefferson, trying to find an audience that is already people who are already attracted to and interested in Thomas Jefferson and want to really go that extra step and get to know him intimately. So that said, Jefferson and I say ta-ta for now, TTFN, and we bid you a good Sunday, and please like and share. Thank you very much.